Hey everyone, Mark Major here at the Action Figuratorium, and this video I'm going to do something a little bit different. Normally I talk about the action figures, but today I'm going to be talking about comic books. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about 3 things that anybody who doesn't know anything about comics can look at on the cover of a comic book and decide if it has any resale value. Now, when I say resale value, I don't mean like this thing is worth thousands of dollars. I mean, you can find somebody who will buy it, anything from 10 to 20 bucks, which is a big deal if you can get anybody to buy comics at all these days, because there are thousands and thousands of comics circling the globe. So today I'm going to run through those with you, and hopefully after seeing this video you too will be able to pick out winners and losers, so stick around. Okay, so this is for those times when you're at a garage sale or a yard sale or an estate sale, or maybe you're in a thrift store or a bookstore and you're thumbing through comic books and you're like, wow, I wonder if there's any home runs in here, or if there's anything that's worth any kind of money whatsoever. Well, here's 3 things you can look at on the cover to decide if it's something that you should pick up and try and resell. Okay, so the first thing that you can do is you can look in the upper left-hand corner of the comic book and you can look at the original sale price. You see, they would print how much the comic costs on the actual comic book itself. And so with inflation, obviously comics that have the lowest price are going to be the oldest, as with time the price just went up. So if you see 5 cents, 10 cents, 25 cents, you know that it's an old comic. Now these different monetary amounts, 10 cents, 25 cents, they actually pertain to a certain age or a certain decade. There was like an age in the 30s they cost this much, and then the 40s comics were this much, and the 50s and 60s. I'm not here to tell you what the ages are and what they cost. That's something that you can do on your own time and when researching the comic. I'm just here to tell you about whether or not it's something worth even buying to try and resell. So if you see something with a really low price, and at this point I'm going to say a really low price is probably going to be something under $1, okay? But really like under 50 cents. Anything that's old will generally resell. Now, that doesn't guarantee that it's going to resell for a lot, but somebody will buy it somewhere. So just by looking at the price tag in the upper left-hand corner of the comic book, you can kind of get a feel for how old it is. Now, comics today are like $4, $5, $6, and I think that that's kind of a lot myself, only because I grew up as a kid in the 80s, actually the end of the 70s, and they didn't cost that much. In fact, you could just take a handful of change and huck it at the guy, the clerk, and you could get whatever comics you wanted. So look at the price. That's the first thing. Okay, the second thing that you can do to determine if a comic book might have any resale value, look at the issue number, right? The lower the issue number, the further back in time it was created, and the more money it's probably going to be worth. So the earliest issue of any comic, of course, is going to be number 1. Now, you might think that if you find a comic that's labeled, first issue, that's a home run, that this is worth something that you can bank on. That's not necessarily true, because a lot of people will buy the first comic of a run to see if they want to buy number 2, number 3 if they're reading it. Also, a lot of people will go through the same, tabulations that I just made and say, hey, if this is number 1, this is clearly going to be worth something. So everybody buys number 1 to either read or the plans of hanging on to it, in a vault and resell it years later. So don't necessarily think that a number 1 is the most expensive one, but anything very early in a run is going to be worth some money to somebody. And it might be that issue 5 is the one that's really hard to get, or issue 6, because they didn't make as many of those. They made a lot of number 1, but not a lot of, 5, 6, 7s, etc. So just take that into account. If you find a comic book, look at the issue number. All right, here is the third thing, and this is something that you probably would not have thought of on your own. I know the other 2 might seem kind of obvious. anytime there is a first appearance of a new character in a comic book, right, they're always worth money, right? The first appearance of like the Punisher, I think, was in like a Spider-Man. The first appearance of like, I don't know, I'm trying to think where Daredevil appeared. Anyways, if you can find these comics where a new character, either a villain or, you know, sometimes it's a character that everybody loves, like the Punisher, and they spin them off and they have their own comic or comics, those are going to be worth money. Now, if you look at the cover, it's not going to say first appearance of. That's just the term that people use. It's going to say introducing the ... right? So anytime you have a comic where it says on the cover and introducing and a character name, even if you don't know the character, you don't know anything about the comic, right? Chances are it could be worth something. So you take those three things together: a low price, a low issue number, first appearance of, you might have something that could be worth money that you can resell. Okay, so those are the three things. Now, I'm going to add on a couple things that you need to know if you think that you're going to make money off of selling comic books, right? First thing is this: nobody is going to pay huge sums of money for a comic book that isn't graded. Graded means an official house, right? A grader, some company that you pay money to as a service, will look at it, and as a third party, as a line judge, they will say, okay, this on a scale of 1 to 10 is a this. They'll lock it in plastic. They'll get the certificate with the grading card on it. That's the ones that people will buy and sell like stocks, okay? So if you find something at a garage sale and you find something that looks interesting and you put it up on eBay, you're not going to get the huge money. You could still do really well because somebody will go, oh, I'm looking at the photos and that looks like it's in really good condition and I know what comic that is. I'm going to buy that because then I'm going to take it to a grader and then I'm going to sell it for the most money, okay? So don't necessarily think that you've automatically got a home run, because until it gets graded, you're never going to get the top dollars. And in fact, I would just like to say that most comics out there that you can actually pick up and touch, they're probably pretty beat. Okay, they've probably been read and you know, may have spine damage, they may have water stains, they may have rips, they may have faded, they may have grease on them. You know, they could be worn out, they could have folds in them, stuff like that. Those we just kind of generically refer to as readers, meaning they're just a copy for somebody who wants to read it. And, you know, people will buy readers, people will collect readers, people will go out of their way to find comic books that they can specifically own to just flip through and page. So don't think that, you know, if it's not graded that people won't buy it. People will buy it. But really, if you come into it and say, hey, this is a reader, and anything you can get for it is going to help. Okay, here is the last thing. For those of you, those pickers out there, those antique pickers who don't know anything about comic books, right? And you're going, is this worth any money? Don't necessarily be fooled by main titles that you've heard of. I know everyone's heard of Superman. Everyone knows who the Batman is. Some people knew who Spider-Man is, right? But those titles are super popular, and those are the titles that sell really well, and those are the titles that they make a lot of. You know, it's like finding a Beatles White Album. What you may not realize, even though you're like, oh, here's a Beatles record, is that the Beatles were at the top of popularity when that album came out. They sold millions of those albums back in the day, right? It doesn't mean that somebody is not going to want to buy a White Album, but you don't necessarily have a home run. You just have a copy that you know somebody somewhere out there will buy. And the same thing with these comic books. You'll find a Spider-Man, a Superman, you'll go, okay, you know, could this be worth something? Well, someone will probably buy it because it's a main title, but that doesn't mean that you've got a really high-end, expensive home run on your hands, right? What it means is that there's a lot of these out there, and now you have one. But if you're looking for something that you think is probably going to be worth some money, it's probably going to be a title that you've never heard of. Again, supply and demand dictates everything. If there's a huge supply of Superman comics out there, they're not worth that much. And they made a lot of them. They made a lot of all those comics. In fact, right now, the only comic that is really actually selling at newsstands from DC is Batman and Batman-related comics. You know, all the top DC comic sales right now are Batman comics, and that's kind of it. So if you think Batman is going to be like some rare find, it's not necessarily true. Again, go back to the three things I mentioned before. about the price, right? You find a Batman and it's like, you know, hey, this Batman's 20 cents. You find like a low issue. Oh, this is issue 9 or issue 13, right? And then you see like first appearance of like the Joker or something. Well, you probably have something good on your hands. No doubt about it. Those 3 things will always overwrite the other things. But don't necessarily fall for the fact that you recognize a title that therefore it might be worth money. So that is kind of it for this quick, short episode. Thought we'd get away from action figures for a little bit. I know a lot of people who collect action figures are into comics, and so some of you might kind of dig that I'm doing this video. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably close out here with some pics from my Instagram feed of some Marvel comic book heroes as they appear in action figure form. Thanks, everybody.